Globally, it is apparent that money's value cannot be acknowledged by the numbers printed on a currency note. It can never be an indicator because each currency has a different worth within its own country, as well as comparing to the currencies in other countries. To associate the value of a currency, we must measure it against real goods. All currencies have declined against real goods as time goes on. Each one has failed to keep its purchasing power throughout time. This is courtesy of central bankers. You came here for the truth, so let me unveil that for you. Today we're going to look at money. That's right. I want to talk about what money is really worth. If we say $1, what does that mean? Do I live in the United States? Do I live in Nairobi? Do I live in New Zealand? What is a dollar worth to me? Well, we're going to talk about that today, and we're going to compare it to things that are real things. That's how you associate the value of it. Now, what's ultimately important is that we understand how much people are working, what their hours are like, what they earn per hour. Okay, very important because that's all factored in. Who works the hardest? Average annual working hours in selected cities. This chart here is from Statista, but they are pulling this information from UBS. I'm going to be showing you several pieces of information from that report that UBS has pulled up, and I'm going to put that in the description under sources. As always, look at this. If you live in Mumbai, I know many of my subscribers do, you can see that you work really long hours when compared to the average. Definitely more so than those at the bottom of this list here, whether it is in Rome and Paris and other cities around the world. We can definitely see the difference, in fact, twice as much. But that is an anomaly here. But even if you take the average of the top few here, 2,500 hours is significantly greater than what we are seeing at the bottom of the list. But it doesn't matter necessarily how many hours you work. It all is based around what do those hours get you? How much of a house does that get you? How many things do you have? How much food can you buy? How this and that. Real stuff. All right? So I'm going to look into this a little deeper today. Working time. I really like what UBS has done with this report here because they've compared not just, for example, US dollars and calculate what each person makes around the world in US dollars. That would be good, but I want to know real things. Well, look at this. They've compared all of these different places into their purchasing power for a Big Mac. How many minutes do you have to work to buy a Big Mac? How many hours do you have to work to buy an iPod or an iPhone? Well, that's a good way to look at it. Hong Kong, you have to work about 12 minutes to buy a Big Mac. In Auckland, 13 minutes. But you move to Mumbai, 88 minutes to buy a Big Mac, 917 to buy an iPod or iPhone. You could see how different it is when those hours don't necessarily equate to being able to buy more stuff. In a place like Nairobi, for example, at the bottom of the list, 134 just to buy a Big Mac, over 2 hours. So I thought that was interesting because I can really relate to that. What does a dollar really mean? Well, a dollar is going to go a lot further in a place like Nairobi than it would in a place like Hong Kong. So a lot of people have been moving and they've chosen to move out of expensive areas, maybe moving out of the cities that they live in into cheaper cities. Maybe they move into different states, or maybe they move out of the country entirely. And this has been a consistent issue that I've been covering here. Looking at people fleeing where they live. They can't afford it. Especially people in retirement. They're on a fixed income. They're living in a certain place. And they decide, look, I can move to South America, I can move to Thailand, I can move all different countries in order to get a better quality of life because I'm on a fixed income. I'm not going to be making enough money to support myself if, I tend to live a little while longer, which hopefully everyone would. This is very interesting because you can look at how much a cup of coffee costs around the world. Different cities around the world, we'll compare them here just very quickly, and you'll see that it's something that a lot of countries, they're consuming it in the big cities. It's a commodity that's just, readily available. It's not something that only one country would have for sale, right? This is a very good indicator. And actually, side note, if you've been watching the channel, you've seen this before, but Bloomberg has something that I think is really amazing, and it's tracking the inflation in Venezuela using the Café con Leche Index. That's what they call it. Basically, how much a cup of coffee costs, and then tracking that and using that as the inflationary indicator because the government doesn't do it anymore. It's obviously not even worth calculating. So this is interesting here to look at a cup of coffee in different places. Rome, Lisbon, Milano, all relatively cheap. But looked at Geneva and Zurich, $4, $5. Copenhagen, $6. Doha, $6.40. It's a small fortune. Dubai, $5.70. What does that mean to me? I'm looking at this and I'm thinking that it's coffee beans. In these places here, they're probably, in many of them, let's say like Rome, for example, or Copenhagen, different parts of Europe, are they growing the coffee there? I don't think so. It's being imported, right? So what does it cost in these places? Why is it such a different price differential? Why are we looking at such a vast gap in between these places? If you look at Italy, or let's say even Milano and Zurich, or Milano and Geneva, they're very close to each other geographically, right on the border. And yet a cup of coffee is 4 to 5 times greater than it is. Well, when I look at this, I start to think, what is the value of money itself? It gives me a really good perspective. So I just wanted to bring that to you. No more ranting. Moving on. Purchasing power. This is something that I brought up recently, that Los Angeles is actually on the top of the list. All right. And part of that is because, the salaries, also what it can buy you in that area. So a lot of people, I guess, are getting paid well. And so they're able to afford, the homes, which are definitely quite expensive, but maybe they are also more affordable areas in that region as well. Zurich is number 2. And you can see they're basically rating this here: net annual income, gross hourly pay, and so on. So it's not necessarily how much you get paid, but what it can buy you. I think that's really what's important to note. Looking at Lagos here at the bottom of the list. This is not Portugal, by the way. We're talking about Africa. Looking at this at the very, very bottom, basically earning next to nothing. Cairo, not too far behind, and so on. You can see these places here that even though they may work long hours, even though they may be, there's a lot of population, a lot of individuals may be willing to work or anything. There's maybe not enough jobs. There's some hardships, economic stress, inflation. There could be various indicators for all of these places. And I think it's important to note what the way I'm looking at this for this video is in not necessarily these places, but in other places around the world where you can take your money where it is, where it might not buy that much, and what does it buy you in that place? Suddenly you can live like a king. Earning levels. Work per year in hours. Taking a look at that here, just more of the same information, showing you how many hours these particular cities, people in those cities are working. The idea of a Bay Area exodus is no joke, and it appears to be growing more vivid and real with each year. I just covered this information, and I wanted to touch on it again because I found some new stuff. The reason for the urge to leave might be pretty obvious, at least to anyone knowledgeable on California. It's just too expensive. Cost of living 45% and housing prices 27% were the main reasons cited among the 461 residents who said they want out. This is basically a small percentage, obviously. But I think it does give us a good idea of what's happening here. They are struggling to get by, things are too expensive, and they can't afford it. Moving on. But there's a solution. Have no fear. California City fights poverty with guaranteed income. Wow, excellent. Well, there's a radical plan to combat poverty in this cash-strapped city. No strings attached, guaranteed basic income of $500 a month to its residents. How wonderful would that be? There are places around the world testing this, whether it is Finland, whether it is in Canada, whether it is in different parts of the world. They give money, they track everything that the person does, and then they can say, is this viable on a mass scale? That's the plan. I think that this is a very ridiculous policy because it is basically giving people incentive not to get into the economy. I think that there are many, many better uses of $500 a month for these individuals. Don't just give out money. That's not a solution ever, ever. All right. Megatrends impacting people's plans for retirement. Reductions in government retirement benefits is the number one. People, what are they worried about? They're worried about how much money that they are going to have. They're worried about their health. They're worried about health care. They're worried about stability and so on. Look at this. People's concerns, declining physical health is number one. Running out of money, number two. Not being able to stay active, and so on. This is what people are really concerned about. And when you have less purchasing power, this becomes more and more of a concern. And I think I'm going to leave it there. I just wanted to say that because of central banking, we have seen the value of our currencies declining. And it's never going to be addressed, really, because the average person, they see a $100 bill and they think that's $100. But that $100, if you ask your grandparents what that would buy you, obviously you know what that means. But $100 today, 100 US dollars, it buys you more in Canada. It'll buy you more in Mexico. It'll buy you more in areas of, just look at what it would buy you in Argentina. Look at what it would buy you in Venezuela. Okay, in Brazil as well. $100. What about in India or China or other places? $100 doesn't mean anything, and we need to get that through our heads. When we see the stock market rising, when we see housing prices appreciate, are we seeing things being valued more, or are we seeing the decline in the currency courtesy of central banks? That's all for this video. If you found it informative, please give me a thumbs up. When you give me a thumbs up, it helps to support this channel, so I do appreciate that very much. Now, if you want the best financial education available out there, my books have it. The first book is about the 4 asset classes and how to profit from it. The second book, touches on familiar subjects, but I also get into earning income, you're reducing your debt, and your monthly expenses and everything else. And this is very beneficial to a lot of people. I know they'll learn a lot from these books. Everybody who has read it has commented to me that they really appreciate it, learned so much. People in the financial industry that have read these books have said how much others, their colleagues, their co-workers, could learn a thing or two from this. So I do think that so many people would benefit from it. And imagine what the average person spends on education and they learn nothing about money. These books, first book is $20, second one is $10. And with $30, you could learn more than probably anybody that you speak to on a daily basis. So that's all for this video. I'm going to sign off. Take care.